Hi guys, I'm here today to do a bit of a geeky video, but I love doing these videos and I love watching other people do them. So, at the start of 2020 I made a sort of reading goals video for the year, which I'll link up here in case you want to go and check it out. And I decided to revisit that a third of the way through the year and to chat about how I'm doing. So, historically, I used to make quite strict reading goals for the year. Sometimes I'd give myself 10 goals and I'd be like, I have to read 5 books of that type of thing and 10 of that, and I have to do this and this, and it was all very strict. And a lot of the time it would be informed by what I hadn't been reading that I felt I should have been reading. I decided to let all that stuff go because having really strict goals didn't work for me. I never achieved them, and about 2 months into the year I'd find them really annoying and no longer fun and exciting. And I also found that by giving myself goals for things that I felt like I should do, it wasn't what I was enjoying in reading at the time, and therefore I didn't ever really want to follow the rule I'd set myself. So for 2020 I decided to have 3 really loose goals, and all of those goals were inspired by things that had made me happy in reading in 2019 that I just wanted to make sure I consciously took forward to 2020. So those goals should be achievable. The first one I mentioned in the video is that in 2019 I read around 100 books, and only 14 of those were non-fiction, which was significantly more than I'd read in previous years, but still, like, not a great ratio, right? But out of those 14 non-fiction, 5 made it to my favourite books of the year, and I only actually had 9 favourite books of the year. So, you know, I read like, I don't know, like 85 or 86, whatever, fiction books, only 4 made it, but I read 14 non-fiction and 5 made it to my favourites. So that tells me that I enjoy non-fiction a lot more than I think I do. I think I'm pretty good at choosing what non-fiction works for me, and I definitely really enjoy memoirs that also deal with issues of, I guess, social justice. And so I really wanted to take that forward into 2020. I wanted to try and make sure I read more memoirs of that type, but also just more non-fiction in general. I think there's so much I can learn from non-fiction that I haven't historically. So far I'm going to just go up to the end of April, so I'm not counting any books that I've read in these first few days of May. So up until the end of April I've read 45 books, which I'm really happy with. It's much more than I've been reading the past couple of years, and I've been really happy to get back into reading more than I have been the last couple of years. And out of those 45 books, 14 are non-fiction. So that's very nearly a third, and to be honest, a lot of the books I have currently on the go are non-fiction, so I feel like it will easily even out to a third quite soon. And I'm really happy with that. I looked back through, and actually still a lot of the non-fiction I've read has been stronger than the fiction, so I'm happy for that to increase to even higher than a third, but I'm happy with a third being the sort of minimum of what I achieve. So I feel like that's gone well, and I'm definitely going to carry that on into the rest of the year. Something else I noted in my 2020 goals video was that I historically read a lot of books by white authors, as I think lots of us here on BookTube do, and I found comfort in reading books that I could really heavily relate to. So for example, I really like reading books about women of around my age, or, you know, telling stories of their childhood in a time period where I was a child, in working class, rural locations. All of those things really worked for me, and a big part of that is because you can recognise yourself and parts of your childhood, and nostalgia is a really big thing, guys, and it makes a massive difference to me in particular about my feelings of warmth towards something. And so I knew that I reached for books like that a lot, but actually what I realised in 2020 was that I think one book like that made it to my favourite books of the year, and the rest were not like that. The rest were from different voices, from different racial backgrounds, people who had emigrated from one country to another, and talking about different experiences that I just have no experience of. And so it got me thinking more and more about the fact that the books I am now drawn to as a reader, yes, I still like those books that remind me of my childhood and the life I live now, but actually they've become a much smaller portion of the books I'm interested in, and I wanted to make sure I recognised that and took that forward in 2020. So just like really briefly looking at this in terms of white authors versus people of colour, I have read 1/3 of books by non-white authors, and then the other 2/3 have been books by white authors. Now, one thing I mentioned is that I am trying to reduce my TBR, my physical TBR, that's books I've owned for a while, and I knew that a lot of that was white authors because, you know, they were books I'd had for a while and I'd been buying when I was in that sort of nostalgia, like relating to books. and that has definitely had an impact. So I'm not happy with that ratio. I'd like it to be flipped. I'd like it to be more like, you know, a third by authors who are more similar to me, and not just in terms of racial diversity. I think that was the easiest thing for me to assess just from quickly flicking through the Goodreads titles, but in terms of all sorts of things, although, you know, I am always going to be the most interested in working class voices, and I am also working class, so that's not me trying to read outside my own experience, but I'm trying to do that because I feel like working class voices in publishing are the minority, and so I think celebrating them and talking about them is really important. So I definitely want to diversify that more. But one thing I will say is I've hauled, I think, 28 books so far this year, and very few of them have been by authors who are people like me. So actually I think going forward with the books I'll bring into my TBR, I am definitely doing what I set out to do, and I've been really enjoying that. Like, I'm so excited about all the books I have to read and all the different experiences from around the world. So yeah, I'm hoping that that will be easier to continue as the books I own decreases and the new books I'm bringing into my TBR increases. And my last goal was to do with reducing the amount of books I owned on my bookshelves that I hadn't read. And this is where I'm going to have to maybe look up and down a lot because I have a lot of numbers written down here, and this is the bit that I'm like the geekiest about because I find this so interesting. So I just want to say again, because I know people get a little bit maybe defensive about TBRs, and I get it because I've been there. Like, so for a long time I had around 350 unread books on my bookshelves, and I reduced that. So at the end of 2019 I had 110 unread books on my bookshelves, and the biggest way I reduced that is I unhauled a lot of books, because over the years of having my channel I have always brought books into my home at a higher rate than I have read them. So it's always been increasing. And actually what I realised is, you know, my reading tastes have changed, and books that I bought 5 years ago and I haven't got around to reading, I'm probably not interested in anymore. Some of them I am, but actually a lot of them I wasn't, or I think I'd been a bit buy happy over the years and perhaps bought some books without properly reading the negative reviews and realising there was things that were going to bother me about the books. And so I am a much better book like buyer now, and I think it through much more than I used to, and so I hope that shouldn't happen so much going forward. But I unhauled a significant amount of books, I DNF'd a lot, and I obviously read a lot of them as well. So I got it down to 110 unread books. And the reason I want to try and get my TBR down to much lower than that even is nothing to do with wanting to live a minimalist life. I don't care, I like having things. It's nothing to do with wanting to not sort of buy into a capitalist structure, because whilst I think that is awful, the one thing I don't mind buying is books to support authors. And it wasn't anything to do with feeling sort of guilty about having all these unread books on my shelves, really. What it was to do with is the fact that I realised that for me, the themes I'm interested in books are very of the moment. And so if I buy loads of books about, for example, like a few years ago I did a book called set in cold locations. I bought lots of books that were set in really cold, icy locations, and I was super wanting to read that. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago, right? And I've got to hardly any of those books, and I'm still interested in that, but nowhere near as interested as I was when I bought 10 books for that theme. And so I think the longer you have a book on your shelf, at least for me, the less passion and excitement and interest that I have in that book, and that makes me sad. I want to feel like that about the books that are in my home. And so by reducing the amount of books on my shelves, I reduce the length of time a book sits there unread, and I reduce that sort of excitement waning, and that's why I want to have less books. So I don't think there's any issue with people who have lots of books, but for me, I started to get annoyed with that whole excitement waning situation, and I knew the only way I could combat that was by having a much smaller physical TBR. So I had 110 unread books, like I said. I actually thought I had 105, I said in the video, but I went through all my books the other day and sort of reshelved them, and I was just checking on Goodreads that they were all added, and I realised there was about 5 that had just for some reason never been added, so it was 110. And my plan was to reduce my physical TBR by 5 books every month. So I wanted to read 5 books off my shelves every month consistently throughout the year, so that I reduced it by 60 books. Now obviously taking 60 off 110 would get me down to 50 unread books, and if I got new books but read them, then it wouldn't increase from 50. And I felt like 50 was a much happier number. Like, I feel like I'd even be comfortable with it being closer to 30, but I felt like 50 from 110 in 1 year would be a massive success. So that was my plan. Now, the current state of play is that I have 79 unread books, okay? So that means that I've reduced it by 31, but only 12 of those I actually read, and I should really have read 20, right? Because I wanted to read 5 every month. So I haven't actually done as well as I planned, but I also DNF'd 8 books, and a lot of those books I got a significant way through before I decided to DNF them. So that takes me to 20, and then I unhauled 11 books, and they were just books that, you know, had survived all these unhauls, but, you know, it came down to it and I just realised that I was never going to reach for them over all the other books I had and the new books I had coming in, and I'd heard some sort of negative things about them which aligned with issues I had with books, so I decided to get rid of them. So that obviously took me down to, like I said, to 79 books, which I'm pleased with. It's, you know, around where I should be at, I guess, 90 books, so it's lower than I should be at by now, so I was very pleased with that. But obviously I have got some new books this year, so I've got 28 new books so far this year, which is around, well, you know, sometimes I used to haul that amount of books in 6 weeks, so doing that amount in 4 months is very good for me, but it's still higher than I would like it to be, bearing in mind the amount of unread books I have. So, you know, mixed feelings about that. But I have read 10 of them, so I've read them quite quickly, and you know, the 18 I haven't read, very few of them I've had for longer than 4 weeks, so I'm really getting through my new books quickly. So obviously I had 79 books that I've had for a while unread. You add 18, you get to 97, which means that I've reduced my TBR at the moment by 13 books, which is good, but it's not great. So my feelings is that I am, if I ignore the sort of 18 unread new books, then I feel like I'm doing really bloody well, right? I've got it down from 110 to 79, and at the rate I'm DNFing, I feel like I will easily continue to reduce my TBR by at least 5 books every month. But I'm also aware that with the acquisition rate, that's not sort of evening out as much as I would like it to. So I think I'm going to get to 50 unread books by the end of the year. I genuinely think I can do it. But I just need to be aware of reading, making sure I read a lot every month to get through them, and also not getting too many new books. And I'm also aware that when the libraries reopen, I'm going to want to rush to the library and get loads of books out, which I want to do to support the libraries. But I think I just need to hit pause on that maybe for a month or so, because obviously I have some new books I want to get through. So that's the plan. So basically all 3 goals are still in place. I feel like I'm doing pretty well on them, could do better, especially on the last 2. But I feel pretty positive about it, and I'm still excited about all of them, you know. A third of the way through the year, I still feel exactly the same in terms of excitement level and wanting to achieve these goals, and this has never happened before. Usually by this point, I have to watch the video and be like, God, I set that goal, I'd completely forgotten about that, and I didn't feel like that at all. Like, I very much knew what my goals were, so that's been nice. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on my goals and how you think I've been doing, and if there's anything else, any tips you would give me for how I could do better at them. I'd always love that. And I'd also love to know what your goals were and how you think you're doing on them, and any other thoughts you may have to do with what I've been chatting about. Thanks for watching. I hope you're all safe and well, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!